everybody? Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully you've had a good weekend. It's been an interesting one across the board here for a lot of us. We were covering Lee yesterday until we had our technical issues on this end. But Lee unfortunately has caused a bit of damage here, and unfortunately there have been people who have lost their lives even. So thoughts out to those people, of course, and their families. But we're about done with Lee at this point now. This is the last advisory that's being issued by the National Hurricane Center. If you look at it on satellite, not much to really show there. It's a shell of what it once was out here, and even before making landfall, it's a shell of what it once was now at this current point. And the same goes for Margot. Margot, we were expecting to be a fish storm and expect her to fizzle out. It's about on schedule for her, so nothing to be concerned with there, thankfully. But now we have Tropical Storm Nigel to keep our eyes on. Fortunately, it looks like for now that the path keeps it away from land, and the main reason I have a lot of confidence is that is because of a feature of high pressure coming in within the next couple of days. In fact, here it is here just before the 24-hour mark that ends up pulling this thing out to sea. As that upper level high really starts to deepen, position itself, this storm's going to end up being pulled along with it as it makes its trek off to the north and east, and as a result, we stay away from land. Not even a threat for Bermuda at this point when we look back at the cone of uncertainty. Bermuda's right here next to where the Tuesday is here, so it's pretty far off. Azores are the only place that I would somewhat be concerned with, but even then, it's pretty far away from the cone. So, there's plenty of good news there for once. Happy to say that I'm pretty sure this is going to end up not affecting land. Thing about this is Lee was not really expected to affect land at first. It was expected to go out to sea kind of like this, so can't sleep on this entirely, but I'm already kind of liking the trend that this is on in comparison to what Lee was doing. Lee before was just going almost dead west at one point. This is already starting to take that little northwest jog, so a good sign there. But this, however, is not the meat of our video. The meat of our video is actually going to be the return of severe weather over the course of the next few weeks and really even into next month. Soon we'll also be having a October outlook and starting to divulge a little bit further into what fall could look like for a lot of us. But we got to look at the here and now and what's ahead. Next 2 days are marginal risk, nothing really to be concerned with as far as severe weather. But interesting thing to note here on day 3, which is Tuesday, we look on probabilistic, we see this hatched risk. This hatched risk is pretty much an indicator for all hazards of severe weather, including supercells and maybe even the tornado possibility. So one thing that I'm noting is the fact that it was stated here in the synopsis as well, and a dry line does develop with this too, so definitely something that has to be watched really closely. So main threat, of course, large to very large hail, but a strengthening low-level jet during the evening could maybe spice things up with the tornado risk as well. Would not be surprised to see 2%. 5% might be a little bit reaching right now. Go ahead and look at that further by taking a look at the upper level wind pattern. This is at 500 millibars that we're looking at right now. We're going to take more of an in-depth look as time goes on, but for right now, this is heading into Tuesday. Not a super stout setup here. This is the point of interest right here. It almost looks kind of like a shortwave tries to develop here. The timing of this is going to be key. If it does develop a little earlier in the day, it could get even more interesting than that. If things do really start to look more alarming here, I do intend to try and go live and cover this, but we'll see what happens with it. But this is one of many different setups that we're expecting to see as we go throughout the course of the next couple weeks here. Next few days are going to be a little bit calmer. But when we get towards Thursday, I'm watching this rather close, even though I'm not expecting a lot out of it. It's a rather disorganized setup at this point. But maybe towards Friday, we could have to keep an eye on the heart of the country here as far as severe weather is concerned. Especially towards the western high plains. I wouldn't be surprised to see some severe weather. Maybe all hazards possible. But as we go from the 22nd onward, we may have to watch this go towards the not northwest, but the Midwest, I should say. Excuse me, guys. But as time goes on here, start to see more and more storm systems start to roll in here. And one thing that I'm keeping an extra close eye on here is the ridge that's trying to develop over here. We start to see that ridge and a trough going in right behind it. Usually that's going to indicate a stronger collision of air masses most of the time. So that being said, when I see something like this, my eyes usually get a lot bigger, and I'm usually paying a lot closer attention to this. Keep in mind, we're 324 hours out, so have to take this with a grain of salt. Can't put much merit into this yet, because at this range, models can and often do change. So this has to be monitored very closely. But this could be how we start October. Does look like after this system, we do end up going a little back towards more of a zonal flow, which is kind of like what we're seeing here. We're not seeing too much in the way of amplitude of waves, albeit regardless of whether it's a ridge or a trough. But that being said here, definitely plenty to keep an eye on here. I think tomorrow I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on this with the low level jet and etc. So another thing to make note of is the fact that especially during this time of year, it's a little bit harder to kind of hone in on certain qualities of events with just one model, I would say. So actually what we're doing here is we're going to take a look at the Euro. Normally during the spring and summer, I'm not as keen on using the Euro for severe weather. It can do a good job, but this year's been kind of wish-washy. And I think the Euro actually in this case does a slightly better job of picking up on it as far as the upper level winds are concerned. This is the area that I'm watching really closely here. But nonetheless though, you kind of saw something similar to it on the GFS, but it's a little bit more pronounced on the Euro. Is that going to be the actual result? Time will only tell, because even though we're well over 48 hours out, this could still easily change. But as time goes on here, and this is a better look at what we could be seeing in regards to severe setups for both Thursday and Friday. I'm a little bit more concerned with the way this looks, albeit it's still not quite as robust as I was expecting it to be. In fact, there was a trend where this was actually looking more robust. But the interesting thing is to note here with the Euro, on the 23rd into the 24th, that trough or this cutoff low kind of digs a little bit further off to the south here. So this could put the southeast in play for severe weather if this scenario plays out. So we have a little bit of model agreement and a little bit of model discrepancy. So that's only going to make things a little bit spicier as far as the forecast is concerned. So definitely need to be keeping an eye on this channel or maybe your local weather station over the days to come if you're within this particular region here. Whether you're in the western high plains, heart of the country, or even the deep south, there could be a chance or two of severe weather within the next 10 days or so. But that being said, let's go ahead and move on to what our height anomaly looks like. This is what our air masses are looking like currently at this time. This is a look at the GFS air masses. It's not going to be too much different from the Euro at this point. But here's where that really stout trough starts to come in, and this is where I think the threat for severe weather really starts to jump up here. So this is early Friday morning in Eastern time. Towards Mountain and Pacific time, it's still probably Thursday. Time we get towards Friday and into Saturday, right where you see this little clear slot in between the two air masses, where I would be most concerned for severe weather. And then as we continue to go forward here, we do see a ridge try to build back up over here, and then right out ahead of this trough that comes up next. Depending on how strong this ends up being will be a key factor in what the next severe weather event could potentially be after this week. Then here comes a really stout trough right here. And of course, this is what I was talking about, that was going to be towards October 1st or October 2nd, how we could start out the month. And then as we continue to go on here, we get back into that zonal pattern. So here's what the temperatures could look like over the course of the next couple of weeks here. Gets pretty interesting because we're starting to get a little bit more of a taste of fall, especially towards the eastern half of the country. But you can even start to see those 80s and 90s retreating out in the west too, which is nice. Some of these guys have had real struggles with drought this year. It's hard to say what's going to happen for this winter right now. Maybe an outlook will be coming up on that soon, depending on how things are with the severe weather and other personal factors in life. But nonetheless, though, we are beginning to really get into that little shift here now, where we're not seeing the triple digits anymore, which is a relief, especially for me since I work outside. I know I keep mentioning it, but this year's been rough. But regardless, definitely some things to keep an eye out for. You can definitely even see that some fronts do develop later into the run here, just based off of the temperature contrast here. Like if I were to continue to push this forward, you can actually even see it. This is where we have a little frontal boundary set up, and this is where the threat of severe weather exists. And then as that continues to go on, we see that prevalent across the deep south here and parts of the Appalachians, also the Ohio Valley too. And the heat builds in right behind that, so I think that we could have multiple waves of storm systems, maybe even severe weather, as we continue to go out throughout this time period here. So that being said, one key factor to look at as far as severe weather, we looked at wind shear, we are mainly now looking at instability. With those fronts and those fronts and those troughs, those low pressure areas, you also get a good look at the potential for lift. So usually right where those frontal zones are, those dry lines, cold fronts, low pressure systems, troughs, you tend to get more lift. So the next thing we need to be looking at is moisture. And by the time we get towards Tuesday, moisture isn't quite ample, and I think that's what's going to be a limiting factor on Tuesday. Hence why I don't see this being upgraded to anything beyond an enhanced risk at best. But there is a chance, and you can kind of see a weak dry line here from the looks of it. You can see a slight contrast over here towards Texas. You have the dew points that are in the 60s, but if you go a little further back, you see the 30s and the 40s back here towards the western half of the state. If these were a little bit closer together, I would be increasingly concerned, and then this would also lend itself to a pretty high probability of damaging winds. But the moisture return is sufficient enough above 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is usually a telltale sign. Over towards this region here, it looks like we get towards 65. Timing is definitely going to be a key here, though. So that being said, as we continue to go on here, as we go into Wednesday, see that moisture return start to make it a little further to the north, and I think Wednesday could be a pretty stout day as well as far as severe weather potential. Then as we continue to go forward, most of the moisture, interestingly enough, stays tucked over the heart of the country. As we go later down the line here, we do start to see the southeast start to get an increase in moisture return. And then with the way the pattern really starts to shift now, some of the really rich Gulf moisture starts to come back in. And I think this is when the danger starts to really increase for severe weather. So when we start to get these richer moisture returns, when we start seeing those 70s. Whether or not these will hold out is still questionable. We're looking very far out into the future, so have to take it with a grain of salt. So next thing we're going to be doing here is taking a look at the probability of thunderstorms here through our lightning flash density model. This is off the Euro. It's one of my favorite models to look at here. I'm going to try to move this camera so that way you can see everything. But this is what we're looking at over the course of the next couple of days here. So this is getting into Tuesday, where you see that really bright color right here, almost I would say magenta at this point. That's where the highest probability of severe weather will end up being, because more lightning flashes you have, usually in a general sense, the stronger the thunderstorm will be. So if you have a high probability of flash density like what we see here, definitely a good indicator. That, like I said, if we look at my if I could move my camera out the way again, move it to the left this time for you guys, you could see 10 plus strikes. That's usually a pretty good indicator that you could see some stronger storms. But that being said, here we'll keep the ball rolling here. And then as we go into Wednesday, probability shifts a little bit more towards eastern Texas. Eventually we start to look more towards the Midwest, I would think, but it looks like there's an additional area right here. The Euro, remember, does look a little bit different in comparison to the GFS as far as its solutions later down the line. So that's something to keep an eye on there as we go towards the end of next week, or the end of this week, excuse me. We cannot do math. It's 169 hours before we get to next week, but or 168, geez. But making mistakes everywhere, anywhere and everywhere. But that being said, here flash density seems to be greatest still across the heart of the country. As we go towards the end of this week, we have this starting to move off to the east here. And as we get towards the end of the model run, this is when the southeast starts to come into play. So having to keep up with the models is going to be a little bit of a feat here. It's going to be a little bit of a trick or challenge, so to speak, or trick or treat. See what I did there? But that being said, this is what we're looking like over the course of the next 16 days. You can even actually see little bits of snow starting to come back into the picture here across Montana here, Oregon, Washington as well even. So, and then even across the highest elevations of the Rockies here too. So, like I said, fall's starting to kick in now, finally. Another thing to make note of, and this wasn't even displayed here by the Hurricane Center on the 2-day, is this little feature right here. This is a little feature that could develop over the next 5 days. It's a low chance of development, but this is definitely set to bring some disturbed weather towards the southeast here, and then maybe even up towards the mid-Atlantic for a little bit. Then as we watch that go out of here, everything kind of opens up for the eastern half of the country a bit more now. It's also going to help keep the eastern half cooler as well. Ridge is not going to really be able to build over that area. And then check out the increase in snow at the end of this model run here. Like I said, into the model run, further out you look, can't put as much merit into it. But even so, to see that early on, it's interesting for sure. Could be a sign of things to come. We'll have to see if that trend continues as well. We are getting closer towards winter, so it makes sense. And you can even start to see the below freezing temperatures starting to come in at the surface here in regards to southwestern Canada here. So here we go. It could be beginning. That being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you found it useful, you know what to do. Smash that like button, decimate that subscribe button, obliterate that share button. And also, if you have anything to ask in the comments, definitely do so. But anyway, this has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. You guys take care. Have a nice evening. I will see you guys tomorrow evening.